Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting Authors at Google Talk. Today, we're very honored to host Viktor Mayer-Schönberger. He is the Associate Professor of Public Policy and the Director of Information and Innovation Policy at the Research Center at the National University of Singapore. He's also a faculty affiliate at the Belfer Center of Science and International Affairs at Harvard University, and his love of the tech world dates way back. Even in the early '80s, he led one of the first companies to work on antivirus protocols, and he developed Virus Utilities, which became the best-selling Austrian software product of that time. And as you know, the internet has developed and keeps acquiring data by the gigabyte every day, just like a giant virtual attic. Much of the work we do here at Google, of course, is to make sense of all the mass and bring order to the chaos, and also to place it in the context of history. As a compulsive saver myself, I'm a huge fan of Gmail's archive, uploading my files to Picasa as a permanent storage, and having all my blog posts saved in Google Reader. But what does that all mean for the future? Like, how are folks from the future going to make sense of it, and how am I going to make sense of it later on? Do we really need everything? In this case, Victor's book paints the picture. The book is called "Delete: The Virtue of Forgetting." Do we really need tools that automatically capture everything? For those of you who may have been here for our previous talk a few weeks ago, we hosted Gordon Bell and Jim Gemmell, who are two researchers a little bit at the opposite end of the spectrum. They literally record everything that happens to them 24 hours a day. But is that really necessary? How will future researchers and lawyers use our corpus of information? So Victor will help us answer those questions. Towards the end of the talk, we will have time for a question and answer session, so we'll have a mic available. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Victor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is an interesting experience for me to talk about forgetting at Google. So I have not a real presentation in the presentation sense, and it's also not a book reading. It's more like a meditation of the importance of forgetting and remembering. We okay with the audio and everything? Good. Stacy Snyder wanted to be a teacher. By spring of 2006, she had completed her coursework and she was looking forward to her teacher's certificate. Then, from one day to the next, her dream was over. She was summoned to the administration of a university and told that she would not receive her certificate. She would not be a teacher, she was told, although she had the credits, passed the exams, completed the practical training. She would not be given her certificate because her behavior was unbecoming of a teacher. Her behavior? A photograph showing her with a cap and a cup, captioned "Drunken Pirate." Stacy Snyder had put this photograph on her MySpace page for her friends to see and perhaps to chuckle. But the university administration found the photo to induce minors to consume alcohol and therefore to be unbecoming of a future teacher. When Stacy was confronted by the university administration, she considered taking the photo offline, but it was too late. Her photo had been indexed by search engines like yours and archived by web crawlers. As much as Stacy wanted the photo to be forgotten, the internet wouldn't permit that. Remembering instead of forgetting. Remembering, forgetting. In 2001, Andrew Feltmar, a Canadian psychotherapist living in Vancouver, wrote an academic article in a journal. In the article, he mentioned that in the 60s, he had taken LSD. In the summer of 2006, like many times before, Andrew Feldmar wanted to cross into the United States to pick up a friend from Seattle International Airport. The immigration officer Googled Feldmar and discovered the academic article from 2001. Because Andrew Feldmar had failed to disclose to the immigration office, although he never denied it, that he had taken drugs 40 years earlier, he was barred from entering the United States forever. Remembering instead of forgetting. Of course, you may say now, Stacy's and Andrew's cases are tragic, but at least in part because of their own fault. Had they not put the information online, Stacy would now be a teacher and Andrew could still drive into the United States. Everybody has to decide for herself or for himself what to make available online. To paraphrase Friedrich Dürrenmatt, what once has been put on the web is no longer forgotten. Really? Do we really know every time information about is being collected, stored, and made accessible? Do you know that the information, for example, you put on your change of address card in your local post office when you move does not go to the post office? It goes directly to the Direct Marketing Association. Do you know that most states in the United States have no policy to delete DNA information that has been collected from you when you were a witness or a victim of a crime? Instead of deleting that DNA information once the case has been closed, law enforcement in this country will run criminal searches against you, against your DNA information for decades to come. You're an automatic suspect. Remembering, forgetting. For millennia, for us humans, forgetting has been easy. It's built into us. Biologically, we forget most of what we experience every day, our feelings, our thoughts. Remembering is the hard part. Since the beginning of time, therefore, we humans have tried to overcome biological forgetting and to hold to memories that are precious. For thousands of years, we have tried, like this Navajo here in the picture, to pass on our memories to our children in the hope that they too may thus be able to remember. This is how the great epics of the world came into being thousands of years ago. But human memory, as we know, is not fixed. It changes as we reconstruct continuously our past. Depending on it may not be sufficient, especially when we want to capture something precisely or for a long period of time. Painting, as humans found out, is one way of encapsulating visual impression to create an external, more precise and more lasting memory, like this beautiful cave painting from the caves of Altamira. Script, originally developed, will you believe it, by accountants searching for a precise method of remembering, has for millennia remained humanity's preferred external memory. Language, painting, script provided us with the capacity to remember through generations and across time. But these tools have not altered the fundamental fact that for us human beings, forgetting is easy and remembering is hard, time-consuming, and costly. The book did not change this either, neither did the phonograph or film. Remembering remained expensive for most human beings and was thus chosen carefully. Forgetting was the default, remembering the exception. This enabled us to deal with time. Through our physiological capacity to forget, we rid ourselves of excess memory. What has long been past fades in our mind. Thus way we pay tribute to time and to depreciate what is no longer important, what is no longer relevant to our present. But because forgetting is biological, we humans never had to develop a cognitive capacity to deliberately forget. That is, to depreciate memories and to make them fade. Today, this is different. You guys remember, Yahoo remembers, Amazon remembers, the Internet Archive remembers, flight reservation systems remember. Yes, you didn't know that. If you look for a flight, never book it, still remember it, 6 months, with your name, of course. From biological forgetting, we have moved to permanent remembering. You know as much as I do how this came apart. 4 elements: digitization, the increase in storage capacity to track Moore's law, the increase of IC density, easy retrieval, and fast global access infrastructures. Taken together, this has led to remembering becoming the default and forgetting the exception. To the extent that should be absolute reason for celebration. After all, haven't we humans tried for thousands of years to overcome the straitjacket of biological forgetting and failing human memories? And in fact, our vast digital memories offer numerous benefits, from improved accuracy to increased efficiency, to ultimately the promise to help us overcome human mortality. But at the same token, I believe that forgetting has consequences, or the undoing of forgetting has consequences far beyond the narrow confines of efficiency. 2 words characterize what I believe is truly at stake: power and time. Power is a relative and relational term. As information privacy scholars have long argued, power over information may translate into power over the person the information pertains or relates to. If others not only have information about us, but the capacity to keep such information in digital storage accessible long after we ourselves have forgotten about it, this informational power increases and has the potential to influence how we transact and interact. But power is not only dyadic. Jeremy Bentham in the 19th century, Jeremy Bentham proposed the panopticon. The panopticon is the concept of a prison in which the prison guards can watch the prisoners without the prisoners knowing when they're being watched. The aim is behavioral compliance through the threat of invisible surveillance. Oscar Gandy and others have suggested that the internet may help create a sense of a global panopticon in which everybody has to assume that she is being watched all the time. Such a panopticon may lead people to self-censor, fearing that their utterances could be misconstrued by any one of the hundreds of millions of people in thousands of jurisdictions around the world. A few years back, the American CEO of the German subsidiary of CompuServe in Munich, Bavaria, was apprehended and charged with criminal misconduct by the Bavarian authorities for a Usenet posting placed in the United States but held temporarily on a CompuServe server in the local office. The Economist at that time wrote, "If Bavaria wrinkles its nose, must the world catch a cold?" That is what the global panopticon can do. But today I believe we may face more than just a global panopticon. Because of comprehensive digital memory, we have to assume that what we do or say online is not only being witnessed today, but will remain accessible for years, perhaps decades to come. This creates a temporal panopticon in which we may self-censor not because we are afraid of how others might interpret our words and deeds today, but how people and institutions in the future might view them. My second concern is time, or more precisely, how we humans deal with time. As I mentioned, forgetting is biological, so we humans did never have to develop conscious mechanisms to put different temporally apart pieces of memory in a temporal perspective. So consider as an illustration the following hypothetical. Jane and John are old friends. Although they live in different cities now, they try to catch up at least once a year. One day, Jane receives an email from John telling her that he's coming to town and wants to meet. Jane is excited. She hasn't seen him for about a year, and she wants to reply immediately, suggesting a nice place to meet. To facilitate that and to remind her where the last time when John was in town they met, she queries her email box folder. Up pop dozens of email messages she has received from John over the years. She's quickly browsing through them to find the right one, but then her eye catches one, a 10-year-old email with a strange subject line. Intrigued, she starts to scan the text, then she begins to read. Surprised, perhaps even shocked, she reads in the email about how John deceived her. And she is revisiting an angry exchange between them. Slowly, the events and the feelings triggered by this very concrete external stimulus come back to her mind, her sense of betrayal and deception. She reads on about how over the following months, apparently, John and her must have reconciled, although exactly how and why, the emails don't tell. But at the forefront of her mind at that moment is that John, her good friend John, deceived her. And suddenly she is not so sure anymore whether she wants to meet John or whether she is looking forward to seeing him. As much as her analytic mind wants to disregard the revived memory, the angry words she read triggered her remembering. They are the external memory that help us remember things that we thought we forget. But in certain circumstances, they may also cloud our ability to evaluate and to decide. Put in more abstract terms, as cognitive psychologists remind us, for us humans, it is difficult to realize time as a dimension of change. When we are confronted with two pieces of memory temporarily apart, it's cognitively difficult for us to evaluate them with time in mind and not to be captured by the memory confronting us, coming back to us. We can try, but frequently the act of remembering something a long time ago, perhaps facilitated by the external stimulus that we receive, will bring it back into our mind with a certain freshness and intensity, or not at all. That may trigger incorrect decision-making. Now, that's not something new. In the analog times, the dangers were there too, but they were limited. Our biological forgetting then obscured our cognitive difficulty with time. But what when we are not permitted to forget? We know a little bit about the consequences of this through the studies of less than a handful of people who have biological difficulties to forget. This is AJ, a woman who has difficulties forgetting. Ask her about a particular day, she is able to tell you when she woke up, who called, what was on television 30 years ago. AJ has difficulties forgetting, but to her, she says, in many instances, it's not a blessing, it's a curse. She is haunted at times by her past, so much, in fact, that it limits her ability to act and decide in the present. As Argentinian short story writer Jorge Luis Borges said, perfect memory pushes humans to get lost in detail with no ability to generalize, to abstract, and to evolve. They lose, Borges writes, what truly makes us human, tethered to an ever more detailed past rather than living and acting in the present. This is the fate we may face with comprehensive digital memory. Through perfect digital memory, we also may deny each other the capacity to change over time, to evolve, and to grow. Without forgetting, it is hard for us to forgive. And so, with comprehensive digital remembering, we may turn into an unforgiving society. But there is another wrinkle to the story. What if, frustrated with the shortcomings of our human biological memory, we begin to disregard our own recollections of our own past and depend on digital memory instead? Does that give those that control digital memory the power to change history? These are some of the threats of shifting the defaults from forgetting to remembering. So what to do? So far, we have come up with a couple of possible responses to deal with digital memory and digital remembering. First is the idea of privacy rights. The underlying concept is intriguingly simple. By giving each and every individual a right to informational privacy, we empower the people themselves to fight for their rights. Therefore, enforcement of the rights, enforcement of digital forgetting is both decentralized and delegated. It sounds great, but it comes with a number of inherent weaknesses. First, in the US, the enactment of informational privacy rights is politically not feasible, at least not in the current political climate. But even if it were, I have my doubts about its effectiveness, because the Europeans have enacted strong information privacy rights for decades, but people have not used them. Whatever additional incentives frustrated lawmakers offered the general public, no-fault compensation, attorneys' fees, shifting the burden of proof, nothing could change the bitter reality that individuals do not seem to want to enforce their information privacy rights, at least not in courts. So maybe information ecology norms could help. These norms are the conscious regulatory restriction of what personal information can be stored and for how long. Such norms necessitate government action because they have to be passed through Parliament, and compliance enforcement therefore may be costly. They do have two advantages, however, over privacy rights. They do not require individuals to have to go to court for enforcement, and they protect against an unforeseen future. An unforeseen future. Well, here is an interesting case to consider. Consider the Dutch Citizen Register. Put in place in the 1930s for a perfectly good reason, do no evil, to ensure the administration of Social Security. The register included information about ethnicity and religion. Once the Nazis had occupied the Netherlands, they raided the register, repurposing the information in it to identify Dutch Jews and to send them to concentration camps. As a result, proportionally speaking, more Dutch Jews were murdered at the hand of the Nazis than those from France, Poland, or Germany. Even Jewish refugees in the Netherlands fared better because they were not included in the Dutch Citizen Register. It is a horrific lesson. As we cannot foresee the future and thus how personal information about us is being used, it may be better to store less than more. This is the essence of information ecology norms. Unfortunately, since 9/11, we have seen a backlash here, together with a wave of information retention norms. In addition to the pervasive rhetoric of fear and security, information ecology norms also go against another emerging dogma in our society, that of transparency. Transparency has become our preferred, perhaps only mechanism for ensuring good governance both in the public and the private sector, requiring information retention and thus limiting the political chances for an expansion of information ecology norms. So, are there any alternative responses that we could use perhaps to augment our existing responses with some alternative ideas? Some have argued for digital abstinence, for staying away from the technical tools that enable digital remembering, not sharing everything on Facebook, as President Obama reminded us a few weeks back, may certainly reduce the threat of digital remembering. But is it realistic with over 600 plus million registered users worldwide on social networking sites? 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 young Americans by the end of 2007 uploaded and shared information about themselves with others. Is it realistic? Another option, ostensibly the exact opposite of digital abstinence, is the idea of full contextualization, or to store digitally as much information as possible. That might sound strange, but here's the argument. Perhaps the problem with digital memory is that it does not capture enough. That is, enough of an event to let us relive it accurately enough later on. If we could only store everything related to it, including its context, we could avoid the negative side effects of memory, of digital memory. In essence, therefore, full contextualization could help us regain our ability to think in time. And at the same time, it would equalize information imbalances. At its core, this is Brin's proposal for a transparent society. But will full contextualization ever be technically feasible? You heard Gordon Bell talk about his life logging. He's still not capturing everything. And if it is, will it actually address the challenge of digital remembering? Do we really have the time to relive all of our past again and again, only to grasp what experiences are no longer relevant for us today? Perhaps. Perhaps we need to look at another alternative, namely cognitive adjustment. Cognitive adjustment is the hope that over time we'll learn to devalue older information and to live in a world of the omnipresent past. Not society has to change or its laws, but the way our individual processes of information evaluation and decision-making work. That, to me, sounds right. And that would solve our problem. I like this approach. But unfortunately, cognitive psychologists are extremely skeptical of our human ability to force onto us a change in how we evaluate and process distant memory that we suddenly recall through the external stimulus of digital storage. They suggest that it may take us humans a very long time to change the way we assess the information around us, to modify what we have been doing for ages. And if we could, what would be the appropriate mechanism to effect such change? I hope cognitive adjustment is working, but I don't want to hold my breath. So perhaps you guys can help here. Perhaps you guys can provide us with visual and contextual cues in how search results are being presented to users, to individuals, so that older and less relevant information can be radically reduced in importance. A different idea is not to change humans, but to change technology. Lawrence Lessig and others have suggested to use technology to change human behavior. The suggestion is to create quasi-property rights in personal information. Think of personal information copyright. Oh gosh, copyright, another conundrum. And build that into our technology so that the technology could ensure that only those can process my personal information who I have permitted to do so. In short, the suggestion is to create a global digital rights management system to protect privacy. But do we really need to create a global technology infrastructure that watches every of our moves to ensure that nobody abuses somebody else's personal information? wouldn't we thereby not create a perfect surveillance system to ensure privacy? In order for privacy DRM to work, we would have to embed into the infrastructure privacy very deeply. And I have not seen an engineering solution that does that. So here we are. I presented 6 possible approaches to you to deal with the challenges posed by digital remembering. Privacy rights and information ecology employ legal norms to address the challenge. Digital abstinence and cognitive adjustment hope that this could be achieved on an individual level. And privacy DRM and full contextualization mainly rest on achieving a technical breakthrough. The 3 on the left-hand side, digital abstinence, privacy rights, and privacy DRM, mainly target the power challenge of digital remembering. The 3 of them on the right aim at addressing the time challenge. None of these, as you have discovered, offers us a silver bullet, although all help in their very unique way to counter the challenge ahead. Hence, we may need to mix and combine them and perhaps even add something else. So something else? So if you've followed me so far, I've probably achieved 95% of what I wanted to achieve. But here is the 5% that are the controversial part. So I advocate for a revival of forgetting. That is to establish mechanisms that ease the forgetting in the digital age and that make remembering just a tiny bit more strenuous. Not by much. I don't want to overly burden remembering, but just enough to shift the incentives of forgetting and remembering back to what we humans are used to. One version of this could be called expiration dates for information. It would imply that whenever we want to store information, we are prompted to enter a date until which we want that information to be stored. Once the date has been reached, the information has been purged. Of course, we can choose expiration dates at will and can change that at any time. Please understand, the core of my proposal is not the automatic deletion of information or the technical infrastructure to create compliance. The core of my proposal is that by prompting for expiration dates, this prompt will remind us time and again that most information is not timeless but linked to a specific context and situation, that it loses its value as time passes. Expiration dates would offer a meaningful way of linking digital memory with time and thereby implementing a temporal dimension into it. It is cognitive reflection of the longevity of information, its lifespan, and the importance of forgetting that I am after, on an individual as well as a societal level. I want us to have a meaningful choice again of what to forget and what to remember, rather than to have to accept the implicit bias of digital remembering. I'm not suggesting that expiration dates offer perfection, only a chance to reflect and to choose. Now, of course, this is where, for the lawyers and the engineers, the fun starts. How are expiration dates negotiated in dyadic settings? How are they maintained? How is compliance ensured once they have been set? And I talk more about that in the book. Moreover, much of the mass acceptance, if ever, will depend on user experience. How straightforward is it to select an expiration date? Can developers like you help by offering suitable presets based on information type and context? What are the tools available to users to change expiration date post fact? There is no one-size-fits-all expiration date system, but rather a whole spectrum of instantiations of expiration dates systems imaginable, with some based mainly on market pressure to assure compliance and others depending on more laws or technical measures. Make no mistake, while helpful as an illustration, expiration dates come with a bag of weaknesses of their own. They are no silver bullet. They are not designed to solve the information privacy challenges beyond digital remembering. Perhaps the most troubling from my perspective is that expiration dates are still very binary, while human forgetting is much more gradual. Perhaps we can develop systems, you can develop systems, of digital forgettings that are more gradual as well. Permit a kind of digital rusting, if you want, and also let us dynamically adapt expiration dates as our individual preferences evolve. It all sounds like a tall order, but hey. The time challenge I outlined earlier, but of course not the power challenge, can be addressed at least to an extent by ensuring that older and perhaps less relevant information takes a little bit longer to be retrieved, so that we don't stumble over it like Jane did, and thus risk clouding our decision-making in the present. Remembering putting photos in a shoebox in the attic? You still have them, and if you want to spend the time to go up in the attic, you can still find them there. Although some of them may have faded slightly over the years. But retrieving them takes a little bit of effort, and thereby it makes forgetting the default and remembering the exception. That little bit of extra effort is what helps us stay focused on the present, on our present challenges. And if you can help us individually in a society to do that, you not only enjoy perhaps a competitive advantage, but you may do us all a real favor. So there are many variants of digital forgetting, but whatever version one can come up with, I do foresee two features common to all. The first is changing the default from remembering back to forgetting. Forgetting can be slow, gradual, or reconsidered, but it must empower users to set it as they desire, and it must be made the default and remembering the exception. The second core feature is that digital forgetting keeps reminding us of the temporal nature of most information, that it is not timeless, but linked to a specific context, and thus loses its usefulness as time progresses, and that it offers us a meaningful mechanism to link temporal dimension with information we commit to digital storage. A revival of digital forgetting, I believe, if used in combination with some of the other approaches, could significantly strengthen the effectiveness of our overall societal response to the challenge of power and time that we face. Forgetting, remembering. Since the beginning of time, forgetting has been easy for us, and remembering hard. In the digital age, the relationship has become reversed. Today, digital remembering is the default, and it is forgetting that is often forgotten. I ask you to help bring back and give back to forgetting the role it deserves. Let us remember to forget. Thanks. Sure.
One thing with forgetting is it strikes me as a permanent task. Like if you forget something, you can't bring it back. But at the same time, if you save it, you can always delete it. So how does that work with the default to forgetting, and sort of leading to regret?
Okay, so the question was, if you delete something, it's gone forever, but if you save something, you can then later delete it. And so the implicit question was, or assumption was, wouldn't it be better to just save it, then you can always delete it, while if you have deleted it, you can't go back. Now, of course, that kind of obscures what is at stake. If you look at the time challenge, just by saving it, I'm potentially already confusing myself if I have fast retrieval, because it's coming back and it's like Jane, or like the case of Jane, may cloud my decision making. So in that sense, saving in the fear that I might need it in the future immediately has consequences in the present because it is accessible to me. A more benign version of what you suggested is the shoebox version, and that is to not throw stuff away, but to actually put it in the shoebox and up the attic. Or some have told me they save their emails but put it in a separate folder and put it in a backup drive. So if they absolutely have to go back and it is worth their time and effort to do that, they can do it, but it doesn't necessarily pop up when they search through their mailbox folder immediately. That's a benign version, and that might help address some of the time challenge. What it doesn't address is the power challenge. It does nothing to help protect us from an unforeseen future. If the Dutch Jews had done what you just said, they would still be prosecuted. They would still be sent to the concentration camps. So in that sense, the power challenge remains unaddressed. Right. So the question was, isn't there a lot of information from the past that is incredibly valuable, or could be incredibly valuable, and by deleting it or by forgetting it faster than preserving it, we would actually rid ourselves of that potential value? Is that an accurate restatement? Yeah, I don't want to deny that. Now, two parts of my answer here. Part number one, a lot of medical information supposedly buried in the archives of the scientific community or so are of dubious value. Because a lot of the technology that was available 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago to the medical community was comparatively primitive to our current technology. And so we wouldn't do certain things the way that it was done. We wouldn't use certain treatments the way they were. So the amount of knowledge that can be mined from these information treasures is probably somewhat more limited than we might hope. The only real discipline that I think would really suffer if we stop remembering completely or largely would be historians who now can use digital records and have much more of that available. That brings me to the second part of my answer, and that is I don't want to enforce or to force us to forget. My idea is not to compelling us to forget. My idea is to compel us to choose. And I want to give choice back to us individuals to choose. And that might actually be beneficial both for the individual as well as for those that then use the information later on, because the quality of the information might be superior, might improve. Because as an individual, I have an interest in low-quality information that is not relevant anymore to be purged, and information that is relevant to my current condition not to be purged but to be remembered. So I really want to give back choice, and choice on an individual as well as a societal level. So if I want to keep my photographs, if you want to keep your blog posts for the next 500 years, just set the expiration date to 1st of January 2500 and you'll be fine. And by the way, if on the 31st of December 2499, you just want to keep it longer, you should be able to go back and just change the expiration date and add another 300 or 500 years to it. That's all fine with me. That's perfectly fine. as long as you have that choice. And similarly, as a society, I think we should have that choice. We should have the choice as a society to decide whether a drunk driver's citation 15 years ago is still relevant today or not. Think about that for a moment, what it does in terms of the legal retention compliance issues. If you're in a human resource department of a large organization like Google, right, and you have a job applicant, and you Google the job applicant, and you find out about something in a distant past, like 15 years ago, of that job applicant, now you know it. So you have that information. If something happens linked to that piece of information, you as a human resource department are going to be liable. So you cannot not act on it. Now you need to act on it. Even though it might be completely irrelevant. And guess what? Given the precautionary principle that most human resource departments heed, that person is not going to get hired, or is much less likely of getting hired. Despite the fact that it has no relevance, this past fact has no relevance to the present situation of that person. Just caution, pure liability-reducing, risk-reducing caution. And so if we had digital forgetting built into it of those irrelevant information pieces of our past, we could address this kind of situation. Thank you very much. I appreciate, particularly let me add one thing. I know that you are in the business of conserving and retaining information. And I really appreciate you listening in to the dissident. Thank you.